Good morning, and welcome to our weekly e-devotion from Glenwood Lutheran Church. My name is Pastor Mark Manning. We gather this week, and our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters are celebrating on the 15th, August 15th, the Feast of the Assumption of Mary. And Lutherans have a sort of a connection to this because of our close ties with Roman Catholics, but many of us just don't know much about it. And more importantly, we don't know how should we relate, how do we think about this as Lutherans? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that this morning. Martin Luther, of course, you have to remember, came out of the Catholic Church. He was steeped in its piety. He was surrounded by it as he grew up. And even as he became more and more radical in his views and was ultimately excommunicated from the church, he still retained that background as much as his ideas maybe had evolved. Where he came from was still a part of who he was. That belief and those devotions and those pieties didn't just leave overnight when he nailed the 95 Theses on the wall at Wittenberg. Well, the Feast of the Assumption of Mary is the idea that Mary never died a physical death like you and I did, but rather like the angel Gabriel or Jesus was bodily assumed, taken into heaven. And it came about as a result of popular piety in the centuries after Christianity develops and people start thinking about the subject of who Mary is, how was she, and we have there are other beliefs about her as well, her perpetual virginity, the idea that she was conceived without sin, a number of things like this. And again, one of those outgrowths is that she never died a human death as we know it, but rather was brought into heaven by God. Now, you have to understand that many things related to Mary, Martin Luther held on to. He held on to her, that she was a virgin. The Jesus conception, of course, was somehow holy and different. He also held on to the idea that she was perpetually a virgin. In other words, she remained that way in that state, even after marriage to Joseph. That's a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult for us as Lutherans to sort of hold on to. But Luther was a man of his time, and he held on to that idea. There are certain things, though, that he rejected. He rejected this notion that Mary was somehow a mediatrix. By that I mean you could pray to Mary and she would then answer because of her place. She would have a special place with God and with Jesus to be able to enable God to hear your prayers. And the reason he did so is he rejected really all sorts of saints, praying to the saints as somehow having some special power to help us. So there were other things that he rejected as well. He really did not support the idea that Mary was born without sin. It's more complicated than what I'm telling you right now, but that she was somehow conceived in her parents without sin, he rejects. Well, in the end, with the bodily assumption of Jesus, of Mary, the Feast of the Assumption, he finally comes down and he says this. The last sermon that he ever preached on the Feast of the Assumption, which is August 15th, 1522, he finally comes to this realization. And the realization is that Mary is a testament to God, but she does not exist to do things for us. The focus on Mary is on what God has done to her, not what Mary can do for us or what Mary does for anybody else, but rather the favor that God has for her. Blessed are you, O favored one, is what she hears. It's God's activity in her. This is what he says in that sermon then, finally, on August 15th. There can be no doubt that though the Virgin Mary is in heaven, how it happened, we do not know. And since the Holy Spirit has told us nothing about it, we can make of it no article of faith. We may speculate, but we have no evidence. And our faith isn't dependent on it either. Rather, our faith, just like Mary's faith, is dependent upon God's Holy Spirit and coming and speaking to us, and choosing us in baptism, just the way that Mary was chosen by God. May God bless you in your faith and in the presence of God. And I hope you've learned something today about your faith.